We got them, gang. We got them. They have been exposed. This is going to absolutely blow your mind. Elon Musk is calling it the bullseye. We've discovered the mother lode. A huge shout out once again to Data Republican. I cited Data Republican's amazing election analysis pretty much every day leading up to November in the last few weeks. She's one of the best election modelers out there. And she's since joined forces with DOGE as this rising new techno-populist age. And she's uncovering some of the most scandalous corruptions imaginable inside DC. And her latest is the exposure of 7 NGOs, right? Non-governmental organizations. Note the term. Non-government organizations that are not supposed to have anything to do with the government. 7 non-governmental organizations that she's calling the Uniparty Unmasked. She has a great thread on X that you want to avail yourself of. And she also gives a big shout out to intelligence expert Mike Benz, who I'm sure most of you know. He's long been on the forefront of exposing the role that NGOs play in what's really nothing less than a mass money laundering operation involving billions. We're talking tens of billions of our tax dollars. Here's how Data Republican put it. The 7 NGOs in the chart below, in my view, represent the Uniparty. Each of these organizations receives substantial financial support from the USAID or the Department of State. Obviously, this is being rectified as we speak with Trump shutting USAID down. Around 2019, the phrase democracy in danger began to dominate public discourse, amplified by the media. This way, and of course, the media was getting, we now know the media was getting kickbacks from USAID funds, right? Now, this was odd. After all, the United States is a democracy, for more precisely, a constitutional republic. But as I traced the influence of these NGOs, a pattern emerged. They are controlled by establishment politicians. They play a major role in shaping political narratives worldwide, and their core mission is always framed as, quote, protecting democracy, close quote. And again, you're going to see these are both parties. This is the Uniparty here. Originally, these NGOs were created to support U.S. democratic efforts abroad, many of them emerging during the Cold War to combat the spread of communism. But with the fall of the Soviet Union, their original purpose faded. Instead of dissolving, and this kind of reminds me of the old Reagan maxim, right? The closest thing to eternal life on earth is a government program. But instead of dissolving, they refined their mission. Now they have positioned themselves as the guardians of democracy itself. So the enemy is no longer the Soviet Union. The enemy is anything they deem to be non-democratic or an assault on democracy. This shift explains why Trump's reelection was framed as a threat to democracy. To these NGOs, democracy means themselves. Their survival depends on maintaining that role, and any challenge to their authority is perceived as a direct attack on democracy itself. Now, this is so brilliant because what Data Republican is doing here is she's taking theoretical analysis to a whole new level. And what I mean by that in terms of theoretical analysis is that in political theory, it's long been recognized that the ruling class uses the term democracy in a very different way than we, the people, use it, which of course is ironic, given what the term democracy means, right? It means the rule of the demos, the rule of the people. Scholars make a distinction between 2 kinds of democracy, what they call pragmatic democracy and redemptive democracy. So, redemptive democracy, that involves true democracy, the democracy of the people. It's considered a restorative democracy, and that there are those of us who actually want to restore a democracy that honors rather than rejects the will of the people. In other words, it's the very definition of democracy, the krasos and the demos, the rule of the people, right? But the Washington establishment, our ruling elites, are actively attempting to redefine democracy as involving solely what they, as the permanent political class, want. And that's what scholars call pragmatic democracy. So pragmatic democracy involves the various ways in which the ruling class, or modern day oligarchs, govern in accordance with their own values, interests, and concerns that are growing, obviously, increasingly alienated from the values, interests, concerns of the people, of the demos. So we see this, for example, with the likes of George Soros, who funds, right, who's has his own NGOs, or the demons in Davos, Klaus Schwab and the WEF. They make the argument quite overtly, by the way, quite explicitly. They make the argument that because our free will choices, the democratic choices of electorates around the world, have the potential of electing world leaders who the WEF and Soros consider to be a threat to the environment, a threat to the green policies that are supposedly saving the earth and making them lots of money, those populations cannot be allowed to vote for the politicians of their choice, precisely because, as they claim, such a choice can literally destroy the planet. So to our elites, when we vote in, say, Donald Trump, or when Romanians vote in Călin Georgescu, that's not democracy. As far as they're concerned, the consent of the governed is not democracy. They think it's ecological suicide, or at least they want us to claim that they think, they want us to believe that they think it's ecological suicide, or ecocide, they might say. Our votes, our political choices for Soros and for Schwab and the WEF are killing the planet. So they believe they are perfectly justified in doing everything they can to thwart, to deliberately thwart the will of the people when that will is expressed in ways they don't agree with. And because our elites are the enlightened ones, the only ones who truly understand how the world ought to be governed, they believe in thwarting the will of the people. They ironically are protecting democracy, in that they are protecting the informed consent of a ruling elite. Now, what Data Republican is doing here is she's basically blowing the lid off of how this pragmatic democracy works, practically speaking, because, of course, you pay for it. This is the beauty of DOGE. These parasites, these leeches, can't run the world on their own time or treasure. They need your resources and finances to leech off of. So they've constructed this intricate network as a front to basically thwart your democratically expressed will, and at the same time enrich and empower themselves in the process. Hey, gang, you know we look out for each other here on this channel, and your health is our number one priority. So if you're one of the 100 million Americans struggling with all the weight gain and loss of energy that comes with a fatty liver, you've got to try Liver Health Formula. It's an all-natural supplement. It contains 12 clinically proven botanicals that help recharge and protect your liver. It's manufactured right here in the USA, and it's approved by independent American doctors. And if you click on that link below right now, you can try Liver Health Formula and receive a free bottle of blood sugar formula when you order today. So don't let a fatty liver keep you sluggish sluggish and inactive, click on that link below right now or go to getliverhelp.com/Turley and claim your free bonus gift. That's getliverhelp.com/Turley. So what are these 7 key NGOs that have just been exposed, these non-governmental organizations that Data Republican and her masterful work has identified? Well, we've got the International Republican Institute, run by establishment Republicans. We've got the National Democratic Institute, aligned, of course, with establishment Democrats. We've got the Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening. I absolutely despise these precocious names. We've got the National Endowment for Democracy. We've got the International Foundation. Guys, I don't know if you have, we have that graph of all the different organizations. That might be helpful for people if they just want to kind of write these down. We've got the National Endowment for Democracy. We've got the International Foundation for Electoral Systems. We've got Internews. Now, we talked about Internews last night during last night's Q&A. This is huge. Now, you would have been privy to Internews last night if you joined our Courageous Conservatives Club, because we had our own private Q&A on our own private exclusive virtual platform. And I showed you guys, I exposed what Internews is doing. Internews is this as an international news funding NGO that just got caught spending upwards of $500 million a year to basically spread pro-establishment, pro-liberal propaganda all over the world, right? So I've seen this myself. I was talking about the NHK in Japan. My wife's from Japan, so I spent a lot of time in Japan. And I'll watch the Japanese news, and it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. There you go. What's that? Go back to that. Let's see. No, that's the International Republican Institute. There you go. Very good. Good. They woke up. I put them to sleep. All right. Good. So that's going to be the 7 NGOs that have been exposed to basically be the uniparty in terms of how it functions. That's the DNA of it. But I've watched the NHK a lot, and I love the NHK. It's a beautiful. That's basically the Japanese version of the BBC. But, and my wife has talked about this as well, whenever they're ever talking about anything American politics, European politics, anything Western, it's like the script was written directly by Nancy Pelosi. The talking points could not possibly be more left-wing. The Japanese were shocked when Trump won in November. They were absolutely shocked. They couldn't, but my wife's family couldn't believe it in Tokyo, because they were being told every single day by their news outlets that Kamala Harris was the most popular presidential candidate in the history of humanity. So that's an example of how this Internews ends up. Now, again, I don't know if the NHK gets direct funding there, but I think that's an example of how Internews ends up basically spewing left-wing propaganda with your tax dollars to boot. Continuing here, we've got the Center for International Private Enterprise, and we've got the Solidarity Center. But what they all have in common, as Data Republican points out, is that they're all dedicated to advocating quote unquote democracy. And of course, they've redefined quote unquote democracy pragmatically, meaning advocating democracy by advocating themselves and their own rule over our lives. You know, they've spent all this, again, Mike Benz talks about it. They spent all this time building these alliances, building these NGO networks, and who the heck are we to come in and basically vote to dismantle that? How dare we do that? And they get in our way. They do everything they can. Unelected officials, by the tens of thousands, get in our way to make sure we cannot do that, to make sure that the will of the people is actively thwarted. Now, Data Republican gets into significant detail in her X thread, the funding, the spending details with each one. I already gave you a sense of Internews and how they skew the news into a pro-DC establishment propaganda all over the world. And we're talking like 4,000 news outlets internationally that they fund. But the key here is that all of these NGOs are not just being funded, or better, were funded by USAID. They're also being chaired by establishment Republicans and establishment Democrats. And they're receiving tens of billions of dollars of our tax monies, with almost half their budget being appropriated for, you guessed it, salaries. They are paying themselves inordinate figures with our tax dollars. Take, for example, just to show you we are an equal opportunity offender here. Take, for example, the International Republican Institute, the IRI. It's chaired by the likes of Mitt Romney, Lindsey Graham, Joni Ernst, Tom Cotton. Look at their budget. Do we have their budget there? It should be the next slide. There it is. They're getting $100 million freaking dollars to, quote, defend democracy. That's our tax dollars. Oh, by the way, 100 million plus. I think it's more like 130 million. But if you could see it, look at these salaries. They are paying out, if you can believe it, nearly $40 million in salaries. Let that hit you. 38 million in salaries, 17.5 million in what they term fringe benefits, and $12 million in travel. 12 million in travel. More than half their budget they spend on themselves. You want to know how Kamala burned through all that money? She learned it from DC. And you'll be interested in finding out that IRI, while being chaired by Republicans, actually doles out tens of millions of dollars to progressive aligned NGOs like the International Organization for Migration and the Office of Global Women's Issues. Now, not to be outdone, the National Democrat Institute is doling out nearly $50 million to spending grants worldwide. And guess which organization that the Democrats give $1 million to last year? You can't make this up. The International Republican Institute. I kid you not. Data Republicans got the receipts. Democrats and Republicans are giving each other money. They are giving each other your money. Here's how Data Republican summarizes all of this absolute bombshell. After thinking it over last night, here's how I would summarize it. These 7 NGOs, 8 if you count the off-the-chart Solidarity Center, together function as an off-the-books shadow government. If you go down a little bit, guys, I don't know if you have it a little bit more, but she goes on to say, most of these NGOs were born during the Reagan years. And while not all USAID and State Department funding flows through them, they basically, these 7 NGOs, control the purse strings for much of America's global financial influence. DEI initiatives created a system of unaccountability and dependency, which ended up injecting more money into them and further entrenches their power. They see any challenge to their authority as a threat to democracy itself. But their greatest enemy is still the same one they've had since the Cold War, and that, of course, would be Russia. They've never lost the Cold War boomer mindset. In their minds, they're the superheroes keeping America from crumbling. And that entitles them to their travel perks, cushy post-election gigs, and all the other benefits that come with running an unacknowledged empire. And ironically, none of us voted for this. Now, the beauty here is that thanks to DOGE and thanks to Data Republican, more and more people on both the political left and right are suddenly realizing that in supporting both the establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans, they've actually, in point of fact, been supporting inadvertently, they have been supporting the theft of our tax dollars that's gone to these completely useless endeavors that were only set up to pilfer money at our expense. That is what DOGE is finding, that the administrative state is nothing more than a front for what is basically money laundering, for moving taxpayer funds around in such a way that exploits things like defending democracy as a veneer for the accumulation of personal power and affluence. That's what we're finding is the heart, the very heart of our federal government. Our federal government is ultimately nothing more than a massive front for tens of thousands of elites to enrich themselves at taxpayer expense by setting up worthless institutions and organizations that ultimately do nothing more than amass power and wealth for a corrupt elite. But the jig is up. DOGE has exposed the uniparty and the administrative state that they use to empower that party. Their days are over. No amount of activist judges are going to even come close to stopping what's coming. A new populist era, an era of true redemptive democracy where the people are taking back their government, is rising, and there is nothing that our corrupt elite can do to stop us. Hey there, Dr. Steve here, and I got a question for you. What if you could go back in time and get in on the Bitcoin era when it was still just under $1? Or buy a prime real estate before the market exploded, say in Manhattan? Or invest in a company like Tesla before the whole world caught on? Well, that's exactly where we are right now. The parallel economy is exploding like never before. New financial opportunities are opening up, and those who see the shift and take action early are the ones who will prosper the most. That's why I'm hosting a live 90-minute event on February 27th called the America's Golden Age Summit. Now, I'll be joined by some amazing expert guests who are going to show you how to position yourself for massive success in this new era. But even better, what exactly to do in this new era. It's a truly one-of-a-kind, game-changing event. Listen, early bird tickets are now just $7, but not for long. Click the link, grab your spot, and be a part of America's Golden Age Summit. Do not miss this chance to get ahead. I can't wait to see you there.